Welcome back, everybody. It's time for another Sabaton history reaction video, and I was trying to decide which one to do today, and the winged hussars arrived. Sorry I had to do it. I'm excited about this one because, to be honest, this is not a topic I know nearly enough about, so I'm fully expecting to learn some things today. I know a little bit about the Siege of Vienna 1683 that this is based on. I talked about some of what I knew during the reaction to the video itself from the music. But I'm looking forward to learning about this. I'm looking forward to finding out what I do not know already. I'm going to give just kind of a few thoughts to get started. But while I'm thinking about it, I've mentioned this before, but if you're new to the channel, though I'm going to always do these reaction videos because they seem to be very popular and you guys really seem to enjoy them, and I'm learning a lot, and that's the goal here, right? We're all here to learn. I don't know everything. I don't think any of you know everything, but every time we do one of these videos, there's a handful of you who really know your stuff on these topics, and I'm learning from you. And hopefully some of you are learning from me in the process. So that's the goal. But this channel was started with the goal of making historic site videos from all over the country and eventually the world. And now that the channel's starting to grow, and now that hopefully COVID's starting to die down, I'm going to hopefully be able to get back out there and start traveling again. So I invite your suggestions about places you'd like to see me visit. My family is planning a UK trip when COVID dies down. After that, the plan at some point, if I can raise the funds, is to take a trip to France, Belgium, Germany. I want to go to places like Waterloo. I want to go to Verdun. I want to go to the places that the 101st Airborne fought. I want to go to Normandy, all of these things. And I want to record all of it, take my drone, take my camera, and bring you along for the journey. So those are the plans that are happening. There are a lot of historic site videos already on the channel, so check out the channel. Lots of reaction videos too. I do daily content, so please don't forget to hit that like button. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Let's dive in to the history of the Winged Hussars.
Desperate hour for Sabaton history.
And then, the Winged Hussars arrive!
Contemporary spectators of the late 16th century wholeheartedly agreed that they had never seen such fine cavalry before, nor could they indeed compare such splendor to anything else in Europe at the time. On magnificent parade grounds, the Polish kings displayed the grandeur of their hussars. Clad in highly decorated Qethsegol armor, with saddles and reins embroidered in gold and precious stones, they rode the finest breeds of horses, donning costumes made of the skins of tigers, leopards, and wolves. They held long lances with large, colorful pennants at the tips, and to top it all off, an awe-inspiring pair of wings that arched from the end of their saddles over their heads, fluttered proudly in the wind.
So a couple of things about this. For centuries in the Middle Ages, heavy cavalry was the tank of the day. I mean, that was the battle-changing weapon that you had. Just like tanks made the difference in Blitzkrieg of World War II. If you had heavy cavalry and the other side did not, you had a distinct advantage on the battlefield. But by the time you're getting to the late 17th century, which is when this battle takes place during the Siege of Vienna, heavy cavalry had lost a lot of that, because this is a time when now you have cannon, now you're starting to get guns, though they're certainly not very accurate. Warfare is changing a great deal by this point. So this was kind of one of the last hurrahs for heavy cavalry. And part of heavy cavalry was not just the armor and the weapon, but the terror that you inspired on the battlefield. And so no doubt those wings were part of that. That was part of the image that they were trying to portray on the battlefield, and the terror they wanted to instill in their enemies.
It is no wonder that so many romantic tales and a wide array of both true and fictitious legends had been spread around the courts of Europe of these men. The character of the Polish winged hussars was in fact a complex hybrid of Western and Eastern culture, coming from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, geographically the largest country in Europe at the time.
Look at that for a second, because I want to go back to that, because, you know, people don't really remember.
From the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, geographically,
people don't really remember, unless you're a student of history, just how big and how important the Poland-Lithuanian Commonwealth was as far as nations go. Look at it. It's bigger than Germany. It's bigger than France. It's certainly bigger than England, Scotland, Ireland. This is a major power at the time, but they're in Eastern Europe as opposed to in the West. And so a lot of the history for we Americans and folks like that, there seems to be this dividing line kind of right here. And if it happened east of that line, we don't learn too much about it. And if it happened west of that line, we do. Because most of what makes up America came from these countries over here: Italy, Germany, France, the UK, Spain. So there wasn't a lot of Eastern Europe, filing into the New World. But important history here.
The largest country in Europe at the time, originating in the heavily armored knights of the region in medieval times. They incorporated influences from Russia, the Byzantine Empire, and Mongol cavalry initially, and later from the Balkans and the Ottoman Empire. The influence from Serbian and Hungarian refugees settling there in the wake of the expanding Ottoman Empire began strongly influencing Polish cavalry in the 16th century. Polish noblemen began creating the new heavy hussar, who was equipped with mail shirts, large helmets, the typical Balkan shields, and long lances. The Transylvanian king Stefan Batory further standardized the hussars, ordering them to drop the shield in favor of a thick breastplate. The new heavy hussars indeed became units with which to be reckoned. On the battlefield against the Habsburgs, Moldovans, Muscovites, and Swedes, Polish hussars achieved great triumphs over their enemies.
So think about that. That's basically everybody they border. The Muscovites to the east, the Swedes to the north, Moldovans, that's part of Romania, to the south, and then the Habsburgs, of course, that's Austria, the Holy Roman Empire, Spain even.
However, by the 17th century, the winged hussars seemed to be more a product of a bygone age.
Yeah.
Most European nations began abandoning the heavy lancers in favor of pike and firearm formations and a mix of various cavalry units. The experience of the 30 Years' War showed that a new era of massed firepower, like the Swedish brigades of Gustav Adolf, easily countered the direct charge of the lancers. Was this the end of the Polish winged hussars? The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth faced crisis after crisis, fighting invasions from the east, from Tartars and Ukrainian Cossacks, who destroyed many Polish regiments. It seemed like the winged hussars were doomed to the dustbin of history. Crown Hetman and later King Jan III Sobieski, however, thought differently. In the face of the re-emerging threat of the Ottoman Empire's expansion from the Balkans into the heart of Europe.
Yeah, and take a look at this, because this is really important to understand. Think about how much of Europe the Ottomans control at this point. And this shows the Ottoman Empire is here, but these nations here, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, these were satellites. These were vassals of the Ottoman Empire at this point. So really, the Ottoman Empire kind of goes to here. So it's all of the Balkans. It's Greece, Bulgaria, a good bit of what later became Yugoslavia and other countries, Hungary, Romania. So Vienna, is right over here, and they're practically on the doorstep of the Ottoman Empire. That is a dangerous place to be.
New hussar regiments were to be raised, reviving the spirit of the winged hussars once more. Sobieski called upon all worthy sons of Poland, urging patriotic nobles to voluntarily fight against the Ottoman menace and raise their own troop. The state, in fact, contributed very little in reality, and the noblemen and local leaders had to cover most of the expenses themselves. It was advertised as a career investment, though. See, they provided horses, armor, and weapons, and they would serve the king in campaign, and in turn were supposed to recover their investment with war booty and lucrative state offices granted by the monarchy. The men accepted into hussars would make a contract where it would take them up to 2.5 years to pay off their arms and weapons, and if they survived that long, they would earn themselves money and prestige. It was a complex, flawed system, but for the time it worked.
So, if you think about that, there's very little downside for the king, right? He's providing the weapons and the armor and the horses, but he's not paying the guys. They're going to get that from what they accomplish. So unless you actually go to war, you're not really going to gain anything for yourself. You're not going to gain any loot that you can turn around and profit from. And you're not going to gain opportunities to prove yourself so that you can get these offices later. So you kind of need there to be a war, need there to be a fight so that you can recover and get something out of it for yourself.
The typical hussars wore large protective helmets, often embellished with ostrich feathers. They were equipped with Hungarian-style sabers or Polish straight swords and protected by a lobster-style breastplate engraved with religious imagery. Now, everyone is of course more interested in the history of the wings. Historians still argue, though, about the exact use of the wings. By the 17th century, they were usually mounted on the back of the saddle, but the argument is whether they were actually worn in battle or were just for show, like the embroidered saddles and decorated swords, or the expensive bows, which were in turn exchanged for wheel-lock pistols when on campaign. Sadly, we are missing contemporary battle accounts in that regard. But historians in favor of the battlefield theory emphasize that the wings were carried like the leopard skins into battle to frighten not just the enemy, but also their horses, easily affected by unusual sights. They would come down on their enemies like predatory pegasi. Humor me.
Pegasi.
Okay? Predatory pegasi. That's
like
what they did. The actual important symbol of the Polish hussar in the field, however, was his lance. Over 5 meters long, 16 feet.
Imagine having to wield a 16-foot lance and ride at full speed while wearing full plate armor. I mean, that is just, you had to be strong, you had to be agile. And obviously this is something that once you use it, you're not going to use it again, because you stick it into a guy when you're riding, you're not going to be able to stop and pull it back out and use it again. So obviously they had to have carried other weapons as well.
The Polish lance was clearly a one-use weapon.
There you go.
It was made out of light wood, usually pine or fir, and hollowed in parts to make it even lighter. This was fitting for the hussar style of fighting. It was often said that the hussars were only good for one day of fighting, but that one day would be the decisive one.
Yeah, this is shock cavalry. This is shock and awe in our modern parlance. This is meant to turn the tide of a battle. It's meant to not be sustained fighting over weeks and weeks. This is meant send them in and completely shake up everything that happens.
And such a day came in the year 1683. In July, the Ottoman army had once again marched northwards, threatening the Habsburg realms and the city of Vienna. An estimated 170,000 Ottoman troops lay siege to Vienna, easily outnumbering the mere 16,000 regular defenders. But despite the clear disparity of forces, the Viennese defenders held out.
Now, if I understand right, though they only had 16,000 men, Vienna had something like 300 to 400 cannon available, which was vastly superior to the number that the Ottomans brought with them. So that helped. But obviously, no matter how many cannon you have, if you only have 16,000 men and you have the population, the civilian population of the city, if you don't relieve that siege, you're going to be in trouble eventually.
Defying the Ottoman guns for weeks. That heroic last stand, however, could not last forever, as food supplies and the strength of the defending soldiers and citizens began to run out. On the 6th of September, Sobieski crossed the Danube north of Vienna with a force 20,000 strong. He would honor his promise to the Holy League to fight the Ottoman menace once more. At the same time, a large Holy Roman Imperial force under Charles of Lorraine was marching south as well.
And don't discount that, because that Holy Roman Emperor, the force under the Holy Roman Emperor, was a significant force. It was like, I want to say 80, 90,000 men. So it was still heavily outnumbered by the number of Ottomans, but it certainly made the engagement more balanced. And I think they got there first, and so they had already engaged when the Polish, when the heavy cavalry charge happened, and there were like 18 to 20,000 in the cavalry, but I think only 2,000 to 3,000 of those were the actual winged hussars.
They would unite their forces under the command of the Polish king, and among his men marched the Polish winged hussars. By this time, Ottoman sappers had come dangerously close to opening up a breach for the Ottoman troops to take the city by storm. Digging tunnels beneath the walls and filling them with explosives was quite literally a burning fuse under the city. The Ottomans would eventually be successful, despite the valiant resistance of Vienna's inhabitants, and it seemed their fate was already decided. But then, one day, on the far-off horizon, the Winged Hussars arrived. On September 12th, King Jan Sobieski and his Winged Hussars came to the relief of the besieged city. The battle had begun the day before, and the troops of Charles of Lorraine were already punching hard into the Ottoman lines.
So again, don't think of this as the Winged Hussars, won the battle. These 90,000 or so men under the King Charles had already been engaged, had already been fighting. And again, the cavalry was only a very small part of that cavalry was the Winged Hussars. So the cavalry charge certainly had a huge impact and kind of broke the back of the Ottomans, but it was not the thing that won the battle.
The Ottomans launched several counterattacks, though, preventing the Imperials from breaking through. Ottoman sappers hurriedly were filling new tunnels with explosives, trying to blow the walls, but at the last minute, these were found and destroyed by the Viennese defenders. The next day, as the Polish infantry joined the Imperials, the Winged Hussars moved through the cover of the woods, approaching the main Turkish redoubt. Preparing for the decisive strike, the deeply Catholic Hussars held a holy mass, steeled themselves with prayer, and their traditional battle hymn, Bogorodzica, Mother of God. By 4 in the afternoon, together with a group of Imperial horsemen, the Polish cavalry stormed down the hill. In all, they were 18,000 strong, probably the largest cavalry charge in European history.
So, and you can't help but see, and I mentioned this before, the parallels between this and two battles in Lord of the Rings. One of them being the Battle of Helm's Deep, but more specifically the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, because there you have a 200,000 or so man army besieging a great, powerful city that is lightly defended. And you have cavalry ride up the next morning after the battle has commenced and charge into the side and turn the tide. Only in that case, there were 6,000 of them. Here, there are 18,000. But the imagery cannot be missed. I mean, if you watch that scene from The Return of the King, it's just like this. I mean, there's so many parallels here.
Sobieski personally led the attack at the head of his Winged Hussars. At about 100 paces, the real charge began. At 50 paces, their horses were driven to full gallop as the Winged Hussars lowered their lances and smashed into the terrified defenders. Lances splintered. Horses trampled men beneath them. Soldiers were crushed and thrown aside. The sight of impaled men before them terrified the men in the rearward units, and their morale crumbled. Most of the Ottoman troops were not protected by plate armor, and their formations broke apart. Some Winged Hussars dropped their broken lances and reached for the swords and sabers that hung from knots at their wrists. Others took up war hammers or pistols as they drove through the disordered enemy to safety. They regrouped for another charge, wave after wave, into the Ottoman troops, as more troops of the Holy League joined the battle. Vespasian Koszowski, in his Song of Vienna Liberated, describes it so. No sooner does a hussar lower his lance than a Turk is impaled on its spike, which not only disorders, but terrifies the foe. That blow, which cannot be defended against or deflected, oft transfixing 2 persons at a time. Others flee in eager haste from such sight, like flies in a frenzy.
That's cool.
After their decisive victory in the Battle of Vienna, the fame of the Polish Hussars grew once more throughout Europe. The Holy Roman Emperor personally invited them to his court for a demonstration of their skills, and the Russian Tsar raised his own 1,000-strong Hussar army under a Polish renegade. Vienna, however, despite being one of the greatest ones, would also be one of the last victories the Hussars achieved. Soon afterward, the Commonwealth, under pressure both from foreign powers and from within, started coming apart. The huge costs of defensive wars contributed to a general financial decline. There were rebellions, and it was hard to really afford the expensive Hussars anymore. Nonetheless, the Winged Hussars managed to survive well into the 18th century and would be deployed in the Great Northern War. But their decisive role on the battlefield lay behind them. Their imagery, however, survived, and especially in the 19th century, began to re-emerge as a symbol of Polish pride and identity, remembering them from a time when indeed no finer cavalry than the Polish Winged Hussars roamed the battlefields of Europe. Whether or not the Winged Hussars arrived, this is the most requested song of all so far.
So far for the Sabaton history, since we started.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this week, actually, it's not this today, but this week actually is 1 year since the channel premiered last February 7th.
What you wanted the most, we saved for the 1 year anniversary.
How many Winged Hussar memes do you think guess how many Sabaton Winged Hussars memes there have been over the ages? Ages.
There's a lot of Sabaton memes about this because it's so easy. Like, you can do whatever. Like, you say, I was just out walking my dog.
And then the Winged Hussars arrive!
And you know, when I first started doing Sabaton reaction videos, I would constantly see that comment. And the Winged Hussars arrived, all in capital letters. And I had no idea at the time what it meant. But I get it now.
There's always opportunity for the Winged Hussars to arrive in your life.
Do you know how the meme started or how...
I think it's just because of the song.
Yeah?
I mean, we were like, when we were working on writing the song and the lyrics, we had this, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You know, it's like, that is so clear for... Then the Winged Hussars arrived.
Yeah.
And it was just, when we wrote it, was damn, this is so perfect. This is the catchiest moment of the album.
You know, it's interesting because we're filming this just after the Sabaton cruise, so this is still 2019 when we're filming this, and you're seeing this in the future. I like that you did two completely different sets. That was really cool. That's really something for the fans.
I mean, on the Sabaton cruise, we always try to do something special because we don't have any big stages there. Yeah. We can't use any pyrotechnical effects or anything because it's a ship. It's a quite small stage and very intimate with the people that are fortunate enough to get a ticket in time because they sell out instantly. But when you were on the ship and everything goes to hell, then the Winged
Hussars. They totally arrived, and it scared the crap out of us because suddenly 18,000 guys on horses turned up, and we're on a boat. So, whoa, boy.
They be everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be a new meme when the 18,000 Winged Hussars arrived and
we're on a boat.
The Sabaton cruise.
I took the Sabaton cruise. Like, Hussars, party of 18,000, your table's ready. Hussars. Nope, the Winged Hussars have not yet arrived.
But they will.
See what I did there?
All right, this was pretty funny episode, but it is a great song and it's a great story.
Yeah.
And
the meme's brilliant. It is a great meme.
Yeah, the memes have created the legend of the song now.
Well, thank you for today, and thanks for 1 year of Sabaton history.
Yes, thank you, and please remain supporting it because we want to continue for much longer time.
So make sure you check out the original Sabaton history video. Subscribe to them. Check out all their stuff. I'll put a link in the description below to the original content. Please hit like on this video as well and leave your own thoughts. What did I leave out? What did I maybe not fully explain or talk about? Let's learn from each other. So thank you guys. We'll see you again next time.